Hello, you've reached us once again here at the Real Dirt Podcast. And today on the Real Dirt, I have Louis Hahn. Louis is the Director of Deal Flow with the Arcview Group. Those of you who don't know the Arcview Group, they're an investor network for cannabis groups. Anything cannabis they've invested in or are willing to talk about investing in. They've done $240 million of investment in the industry. I personally know people that have pitched to the Arc Group and pitched and received money from the Arc Group for investment. They're one of the leading people in this industry with so many people that are maybe like dubious or more money oriented. The Arcview Group really comes out authentic. And I'm really glad today and proud today to have Louis Hahn with me. How you doing, Louis?
Thanks for the intro, Chip. I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me on the Real Dirt. Pleasure to be on.
Oh, man, I was so excited when we started chatting about being on the Real Dirt, specifically because I love your title, Director of Deal Flow. Did you come up with that?
It was a collaborative effort.
Okay.
It is a pretty unique position that you don't exactly go to college and get a major for. Yeah, I think that title best captures what I do here on a day-to-day basis.
I love the deal. I'm a business person at heart, even though, we're doing this like media project right now with the Real Dirt. It's all about the deal. I love buying. I love selling. I love negotiating between the two parties. I love feeling like that moment when the deal isn't going to go through and you're like, well, how about if we do it this way? And then it just all works. So I imagine your life is like that, like all day long.
Pretty much. By and large, we're not so much talking about the exchange of products. We are talking about investments. Day to day, I work with, or I see more than 20 to 30 opportunities coming to me per week personally, whether they're coming in through our website or referrals or things of that nature. I see a lot of that front end of the deal flow, and not just the front end, but also for companies that really do make it. I see them grow and pitch to our network, and at the end of the day, a lot of them do receive funding as well. And then, of course, even beyond Arcview, seeing them go out and build real businesses with real products for people and seeing them out in the world. I mean, I've got a bunch of stories to tell there, but I think we'll wait to get to that part.
Everybody's got a story to tell, as they say. And I know you meeting some incredible entrepreneurs. Hey, I asked you a moment ago, like what Arcview was, and man, you said it just so right. Could you give that to me? What is Arcview Group? What is the Arcview Group?
For sure. So the Arcview Group, we're a 9-year-old investor network and market research firm for the cannabis industry. Over the course of the 9 years, our investor members have placed more than $240 million into cannabis companies that we've looked at and have come through the network. And we'll look at everything from brands and dispensaries to hardware and SaaS. If it has to do with cannabis, we'll take a look at it.
How long have you been with Arcview?
Myself, I've been with Arcview for a little over 3.5 years. September will be my 4th year anniversary.
What was your background before you got involved with Arcview? Were you involved with cannabis previously? Did you know what it was?
I knew what cannabis was. It's a bit of a meandering story, but I'll give you the short version. Basically, I was graduating law school in 2014, and I had a pretty big decision to make of what I was going to do with the rest of my life after graduating from law school that year. 2014 also just happened to be the year, right, that Colorado and Washington made their announcements about going recreational. And that got me curious. Here I was, fully equipped to read and interpret the law. And I was curious about what California's cannabis framework looked like. That system was the Prop 215 SB 420 system. Very different than what the cannabis world in California looks like today. But it made it a fairly or relatively low barrier to entry to get involved with. So I had some savings, and I actually started my own cannabis business as well. It was a delivery-based collective that ran up and down the East Bay of the San Francisco Bay Area, grew it to 300 patients, made it profitable, and practically did everything myself. So I started out being a cannabis entrepreneur myself, actually, after taking a look at California's legal framework. After doing that for about a year, I sort of saw the writing on the wall that eventually a big book of regulations was coming down. And here we are with Prop 64 and everything, right? By that time, I had actually joined the Arcview Group in 2015, in late 2015, and I haven't looked back since.
So you joined Arcview in 2015. That was before the California regulations came into place, but after Oregon and Colorado and Washington. When you first came in, it was a different pitch environment back then, because now it's readily, it's legal in so many states now, or going legal in so many states. I'm interested in what it kind of looked like back then and what it kind of looks like now.
Oh, so much has changed in just the 3 or 4 years since I joined Arcview. When I started, Arcview was only at about 300 or so investor members, with just about $60 million deployed. And over the course of at least my tenure here, we've doubled those investor member numbers, and we've quadrupled the number of investments in just about a third of the time of our history. Part of that accelerated growth really has to do with both of the kinds of clients that we work with, the fundraising companies and the investors themselves. Back when I joined, it was a lot of angel-sized deals because that's simply where the industry was. No one really could scale up to become a massive company that needed tens or hundreds of millions of dollars in funding. The industry was fairly nascent and small, and so there was a lot of startup and seed stage deals. And on the flip side, angel investors who had the risk tolerance to deploy capital into these angel or seed size deals. Good for them, though, because a lot of those names have turned out to be household names now. For example, MJ Freeway was the very first company ever to pitch to Arcview back when it was just 8 people sitting around a conference table. Same thing with Ease or Medicine Man Denver and other companies that are big players in the space. But more recently, these companies have grown up and are now looking for Series A, B, C level funding, growth stage capital, as we call it, where they're looking to scale up their business and not so much start their business. So that requires a lot of capital. And the investors, too. There's a lot more cannabis-specific funds now, which we're also in the phases of building ourselves as well. But funds have come into the space, which are able to deploy not just a large amount of capital to meet those Series A, B, et cetera, raises, but also the strategic relationships and the knowledge and the skills, things that simply money can't solve, to help grow businesses too. So just the landscape has changed a lot over the last few years.
So many of our listeners are business people, business owners that are either want to get into cannabis or are already into cannabis in some form or fashion, want to scale their businesses. And I'm sure many of them out there are confused by some of the words you just said, as I was too when I first heard them. In the early days of Arcview, you mentioned it was mostly angel investors. Could you tell me the difference between the angel investors and the funds and kind of how they act now?
Angel investors, the term refers to usually an individual, so not like a formally organized fund or organized group, but an individual investor. It could be a rich aunt, it could be your dentist or that sort of thing. And these are people who have extra cash that they have lying around that they want to invest in, usually startups. The term angel refers to, it's kind of funny, but most funds and, people on Wall Street, investors on Wall Street, that sort of thing, they're usually looking to fund huge multi-million or multi-billion size deals and generally don't get involved in startups. Startups is a fairly new thing, only having developed it over the last 60 or 70 years. And so an angel, though, like an angel, will come down from the sky and bless your company with their investment because no one on Wall Street is willing to touch it. Again, because they only get involved at a certain scale or a certain size. But that's what the term refers to. Now, that's different than an accredited investor, which is actually a formal term defined by the SEC, which says that you need to be of a certain net worth or make a certain income to meet the baseline standard in order to gain all these favorable benefits under securities laws. That's also a group of folks that we work with, accredited investors. In fact, we only work with accredited investors. But within that catch-all category of accredited investors, you have the angel investors, which I just described, funds, family offices, VCs, that sort of thing.
What's the difference between the level of investment an angel investor might come in versus a group?
Typically, an angel investor, will help a startup out at the very early stages of the company. You might have just the idea, or maybe you have proof of concept, and now you're looking to actually launch a business with this thing. Typically, I've seen ask sizes, raise sizes, anywhere between 150,000 to 500,000 to get things just started. And that's where an angel investor will typically come in. Oftentimes with other angel investors too, where they'll pool together their resources to invest in the startup round of a company. That's different than a company that's looking to scale and raise what's called a Series A, B, C, on and on. These companies are often raising 1, 5, 10 mil or more to help scale their business because they're beyond the proof of concept point. They're probably already doing $1 million or more in sales already, have a pretty good regional or national footprint, and now they're looking to really just blow up and scale the business so that they can get into all their channels.
Man, financing is the hardest part in cannabis ancillary businesses. Our primary business is selling picks and shovels, tools, grow lights, fertilizers. We make potting soil, and we're still have our own problems with financing and with banks. We still get thrown in, so to speak, with ganja growers. Not that I think that's a bad lot. I think it's a pretty good, cool group of people to be in with. It is difficult if many people who haven't been involved or want to get involved in cannabis. It is different taxation. It's different financing. You can't just get lines of credit. You can't get SBA loans. None of that easily. You guys, you really have done a tremendous amount in that arena. And I mean, I know $240 million, it says a lot of money to me and other people here listening to it, but it's just a drop in the bucket of the potential financing for this multi-billion-dollar industry. Do you have an idea of the investment capability of the industry or how much investment the industry needs?
So in terms of the investment capability of the industry, over the years, I've seen that definitely mature and get more sophisticated. I mentioned at least early on when I started here was a lot more angel-sized investors who are only capable of deploying individually, 10, 25, 50K at a time, which is difficult when you're trying to raise $5 million, for example, right? Mm-hmm. But there are definitely a lot of funds who are organizing themselves, individual investors who realize the potential in pooling together their resources. But more and more interesting enough, I've seen those startups that I was talking about who 9 years ago were just a startup themselves. They have grown up to become really big players in the space and are acquiring companies themselves. Sometimes we don't think about mergers and acquisitions or companies acquiring others as an investment, but it kind of is. Mm-hmm. For a startup that's looking to, looking for an exit or maybe looking for a strategic partner. The cannabis industry, as challenging as it may be, there are some big players in the space, and more, a lot of them are acquiring companies themselves to either enter into new markets or develop a new product line or things like that.
Yeah, you mentioned Medicine Man Denver earlier as one of the first people to go through the Arcview system. I mean, they've done just that. They've bought several people now. They're a publicly traded company in some form. Mm-hmm. Medicine Man, I might get it all wrong, but we had their former CFO on the show not too long ago. They're a local customer of ours. We do a good bit of business with them. But they've bought Denver Consulting Group, their Medicine Man Technologies. They have Success Nutrients, 3Alite. They've really expanded that way.
Part of the M&A strategy, instead of starting all over yourselves, you might as well work with someone who's already doing it. So we're saying, I'm personally seeing a lot more of that activity just within our network too.
Better to buy it and to build it, that's for sure. I built a few houses, a few warehouses, a few manufacturing plants, and there was always a point in it when I said, oh man, I wish I could have just bought this thing. I should have just bought something,
I hear you.
So, man, I want to know how it works. I want to know, like, if one of my listeners out there is absolutely going to get in touch with you guys. What do they expect? They're going to call you up and they're going to say, hey, man, I need $5 million because I want to grow hemp in South Carolina or something like that. I know it's not that easy, but it kind of is. Could you take me through it all?
So just to be clear, Arcview isn't a broker-dealer, which is a specific term that refers to someone that has a license from FINRA and other governing agencies that get a little bit more hands-on in really marketing the opportunities to investors. As an investor network, we really work with our investor members, the 600 plus accredited investor members. We're all signed up with us because they're actively interested in looking at opportunities in the cannabis industry. And so how it works, there's two main ways that companies have successfully raised capital through us. One of them is event sponsorship. One of the key drivers of our investor activity are the 3-day private investor meetings that we hold 5 times a year all over the world. We've been to Hong Kong and Vancouver and Toronto and, of course, all around the United States, from San Francisco to New York. But we do take a limited number of event sponsors who are really looking to make a big presence in this space, or maybe be on a panel in front of 200-300 or more investors in an audience, and it demonstrates our thought leadership, or even fundraise as well. But there's another channel as well, and this has served us well over the years too, and this is a competitive vetting process that we have that involves more formally applying with us, getting set up on our platform, making your case to our investment committee, which is a group of 17 of our investor members who help us decide which opportunities should get greater exposure to the rest of the network. And for those who really knock it out of the park, some of them will get a free pass to the investor conferences, like the one that we'll be having in Vancouver at the end of April, or Bogota, Colombia, that we're doing at the beginning of May. We have those two channels because there are, huge companies that want to really make a splash with our investors. And then there are startups who are a little more cash strapped, but we're always looking for the next big thing too. So leveraging any one of those opportunities or channels to get in front of our network has proven to be pretty successful with our network. And the best place to get started is our website. We actually have a little easy form that you can fill out that asks you to generally talk about yourself and your business. And from there, we'll decide how we'll work best together.
I've discovered this miracle product that makes cannabis grow better than anything else. And I look up your website after listening to this episode with The Real Dirt. And I'm like, okay, I need to get in as an event sponsor, or I need to get in with Arcview somehow. Let's talk about the event sponsors. You're having one here in Vancouver in a few weeks, right? April 20th?
April 23rd to 25th. 23rd
to 25th, Vancouver, Canada, one of my favorite places in the world. I was just there. I shared a photo with you when I was there, as a matter of fact, of the legal cannabis smoking area outside the airport.
That was mind-blowing to see.
Yeah, that was really cool to see. So as an inventor and entrepreneur, I just register with you guys and show up at one of these events and meet people and start from there. Is it that simple?
Not quite, but almost. And so our investor meetings, like the ones that we're hosting in Vancouver, these are private gatherings for just the investors in our network, certain sponsors that have signed up with us, and certain companies that have made it through our vetting process. And it's this intimate, curated atmosphere that has really been one of the best value points in working with Arcview. Other conferences, they're come one, come all, open to the public. And so when you're bumping into someone and trying to meet someone, you don't know if they're an investor or just looking at the space or what have you. At Arcview, that's our bread and butter. That's all we do. And so having this tight-knit community at our venues, that's what's really made it effective for entrepreneurs that have come through our process or have signed up as sponsors, in gaining confidence that whoever they are going to bump into at our conferences is either going to be a well-intentioned investor or a serious player in the space as a strategic partner or as a company themselves. And so if you do want to join us in Vancouver, starting on our website is the best place to go. And we'll talk about either event sponsorship if you're at that scale, or going through the competitive vetting process that we have. And it's through one of those two channels that you'll have to engage in if you want to have any presence at the Arcview Vancouver conference or any of our investor meetings.
So I just hop right to the end, just like me. So first it starts out with this competitive vetting system that you have. Tell me about that. How does that work?
I interview companies and see which opportunities are going to get through onto our platform and have them more formally apply. A formal application involves, getting on our proprietary deal flow platform. Think of it as like an angel list or Facebook, but just for opportunities that Arcview investor members have access to. And so everyone has to interview with me, and if they're good, they apply. And they apply not just to be on the platform, but also to gain time in front of our investment committee. It's that group of 17 individuals that I mentioned earlier that help us look at opportunities and vet them. You make your case to them, and if this committee of investors like what they see, they'll approve you not just for a publication on our platform, but also if you'll be invited to any one of our investor conferences. All in all, it probably takes about 2 to 4 hours of work, depending on what you have ready and what you don't. And that's just the process part and not the actual conference itself, which I mentioned is, 3 days.
Do you have like an example, or like maybe example's not right. Do you have like a success story you could tell me with someone who called you up and now they're billionaires? They called you up and now they're spreading fine cannabis across the world.
Right. Well, one company that, I'll share a couple of quick stories. There's one company called Aqualidas. They're a Canadian LP, and you can get some details from a site called New Cannabis Ventures. And so, what I'm saying here isn't proprietary or confidential or anything like that. There's a company called Aqualidas. They're a Canadian grower, not publicly traded or anything, and they're based in Nova Scotia. Now, when they first came to me, I'll admit, a lot of Canadian LPs were knocking on Arcview's door. It was right around one of those boom periods where everyone wanted to become a Canadian grower. This woman, Myrna Gillis, the CEO, had a very interesting background, a professional background, had surrounded herself with good people, and wasn't just about growing cannabis, but growing cannabis in a sustainable way. They were using aquaponics technology. They were one of the few, if not the only, cultivators that was leveraging wind and water power in Nova Scotia. And all those elements put together made them stand out from everyone else who just wanted to grow the best weed for the cheapest price possible. It took a little bit, again, I'll admit, to convince me that they were special in the beginning. But as soon as they came to our conference for the first time, they gained a ton of traction. And then they pitched with us again, I believe, 2 times after that. All in all, they raised close to $11 million out of investors that they met through this group. And that's one of the success stories that I'm really proud of.
How long did it take them to put that together?
It took them about a year. They went through 3 Arcview meetings, if I recall correctly, over the course of 2017 to 2018. And I think after, getting introduced to investors that way and really solidifying their relationships, they were able to raise $11 million out of our group. That's one story. Another story is a company called Spring Big. Jeff Harris is the CEO over there. And when he first engaged with us, he was just raising a fairly standard bridge round. And, he didn't know much about us. We didn't know much about him. But as soon as I looked at his pitch deck and some of the metrics there, I could tell that he had something really interesting going on. And so we moved him forward through our process, too. I think the investors in our network were impressed by the team as well as the business that he had already built. And I believe just this past December or November in 2018, late 2018, they had closed $5 million as part of the Series A from, again, investors that they met through this group. And that was in addition to the bridge round that they came to us for in 2017, which was on a little bit on a smaller end. So all this is to say that there are companies who have sort of just worked with us once, gotten the capital that they needed, and moved on with the rest of the business. But I'm also really happy to see companies that even I might have been skeptical about, to be honest, in the beginning, but that repeatedly worked with us to raise the capital that they needed to scale their business even further. And I'm really proud and happy about that.
That's many interesting things about business that surprise me. I'm always learning, but I have seen so many people who you thought were going to make it and it was going to be they're like, well, they got their stuff together, and it didn't work out for them. And then I've prejudged other people in a similar manner. I'm like, oh, they don't have it together. Right. It's not going to work for them. Who are these guys? And I'll say one of my now best friends, Justin Jones, Greg Gammett, they were two of these guys who they came into my store and I was like, there's no way these guys are going to succeed. Right. And now literally, I think Greg's, building 420,000 square feet of cultivation. They've got multiple cannabis businesses. Justin Jones is making 40 million hemp seeds today. So people will surprise you. That's for sure. You mentioned this thing that happened that people talk about, and I've been involved in cannabis my whole life. And before, the way you got money was you went to your buddy or your godfather, your grandfather, and said, "Hey, man, I want to borrow some money to go and grow weed," right? And they would give it to you, and you would pay it back to them. And you mentioned earlier when MJ Freeway, when they pitched you guys, it was just in a room with 8 people around a table. But now it's a different world now. It's more sophisticated. And these words of pitches and pitch decks and IPIDA, these are all foreign words to people. Market evaluation, market cap, and now it's starting to be common things people talk about. Could you explain a pitch deck to us and what it is and what it could kind of look like? And then maybe you got some advice over that.
For sure. So a pitch deck is, it's actually used in a lot of different contexts, not just in investments, but in sales, for example, when you're trying to propose something to a new client. But in the investment context, a pitch deck is usually something that's built in PowerPoint or a Keynote or something like that. And it talks about at a very high level the key aspects of your business, the product, the team, how much you're raising, what the capital will be used for, the market that you're involved in, all those like really high level details about your business. And that's usually used to start the conversation, sending it to investors via email, taking the deck around with you to investment conferences or big expos and things like that, and using that as a conversation opener, really. And then you have a more full-fledged conversation with investors and attorneys and all that involved later down the road. But a pitch deck is simply something that you open with to really send around to gauge people's interest.
That's a really great way to describe it. People send me pitch decks all the time for various things. Many of them are so complex. There's so many details in them. But that's not what needs to happen. It just needs to be a small, brief document that just says, hey, this is who we are, and this is what we're doing, and this is what we want from you, and let's talk more about it.
Exactly. I mean, I have seen really long, in-depth decks as well, and they have their place. But by and large, at least here at Arcview, something easy, a teaser, an opener, that sort of thing, just to get the conversation started. That's usually what I see over here.
So I've got a pitch deck, and I've opened it at one of your conferences to someone. I got a deck. Here's my deck. Here, check out my deck. Then there's an informal conversation, right? Mm-hmm. If the investor likes you or they want to hear more, they're going to invite you into a more formal pitch, right? Where you're in a private room with people and you're going to convince these guys to give you $5 million, $10 million, $40 million, right? You got some pitch advice for people?
I should take a step back. And before talking about the pitch, one of the things that I think some startup founders and entrepreneurs miss out on is understanding their audience, right? And this is kind of particular to Arcview. And so maybe I'll be a little selfish here. But, I think a lot of startup founders in the cannabis industry, they're used to talking to people who aren't very knowledgeable about cannabis, right? Maybe the person that they're talking to has heard about all the great benefits of cannabis as a medicinal plant. Maybe they've heard about the big upward potential of the industry on a commercial level, but don't know really the ins and outs. But here at Arcview, you're kind of preaching to the choir. You don't need to convince anyone that cannabis needs to be descheduled. You don't need to convince anyone that there's this huge market potential and the medicinal benefits and all that stuff. Now we just need to get into the nitty-gritty details of your business. I'll get, and usually in that first conversation, people who open up about the medicinal benefits and the scale of the market and things like that. And I'll say, okay, hold on, we get that. Now let's get to you. Let's talk about you. So if there's any entrepreneurs who are raising capital and have only done it once or twice, or it's new to them, one of the things that I would advise is understanding the audience that you're pitching to. Now, when it gets to the pitch itself, I would follow the conversation. There are, example decks out there, not just in cannabis, but in tech and in other spaces that have this formula, right? Problem, solution, market, team, et cetera, et cetera. You can very efficiently deliver information that way, but turn it into a conversation. I mean, getting involved with an investor is almost like getting married. This is someone who's going to be involved in your business for 5 to 10 years or more in a lot of cases. And given the amount of equity that they may own in your business, they may have something to say about the direction that your business is going, whether it comes to a new hire or a new product or a new market that you're getting into, any of those things. And so it's really important that you are authentic in your presentation, in your pitch, but you're also trying to build a relationship with them because, again, you're going to be involved with them for a number of years if everything works out. Just being authentic about yourself, I think, is an important part of that conversation that you're having. And also talk about your team. It's kind of funny, but a lot of my conversations, too, they jump right immediately into the ins and outs of their technology or their product, or they'll get to how much money they made last year or things like that. But one of the key things that we look at here at Arcview, and from our conversations with investors in our network, what they look at too is, the backgrounds of the team, the pedigree of the team. Have you done this before? Have you been an entrepreneur before? What's your level of education in the cannabis space? Have you raised capital in other contexts? What do you like to do for fun? So all those things about the team should also come across in the pitch, because a number of times they'll spend the entire time just talking about everything else about the business, except who's running the ship.
Yeah, the team is the most important thing, that's for sure. I get excited about it, too. I jump right into it all the time. We did it today in our pre-interview for this. I just jump right into it. I was like, wait a second, gotta get back. You mentioned marriage earlier, but someone mentioned it to me as like, well, you got to date first. You can't just like go out and be like, hey, I'm looking for $10 million. You got to like warm the people up a little bit. They got to get to know you. Just like you said, you got to make sure you want to be in business with them for so many years, right? Because a large investment or any small investment, if it starts to go wrong, then, it's important to pick the right people where you can all come to terms on how things are going right or wrong. You just can't jump at the first money that's given to you, that's for sure. Nor should you jump at the first idea that's pitched at you. I've unfortunately seen numerous people make financing mistakes, and that's the biggest thing they do wrong, is they don't vet their investor well enough. They don't see how he's broken up with other people. They don't check out if he has a lawsuit history. They don't know if he has a drug or alcohol problem or if he's even full of shit, And I've seen numerous people waste months and even years with people who didn't have the money, but said they did, who didn't have the resources, but said they did. I've also seen like really good people jump into bad investment relationships, and borrow $5 or $10 million, or invest $5 or get someone to invest $5 or $10 million with them, and then the market changes or there's a problem and people are unhappy. And now these people's dreams, their cannabis dreams, are literally like ruined in some cases because they chose the wrong investors. What do you guys do to vet your investors? We talked about how you vet the entrepreneurs, but how do you vet the investors?
I work with a really good team here that, I can't say I do everything myself, but I work with a really great team here who works with both onboarding new investors and working with them throughout the course of their membership in identifying the right opportunities for them. In terms of vetting, we ask them to certify that they're accredited investors, that they meet that legal definition of what an accredited investor is. We have conversations with them, and our team is really hands-on. We all go to these conferences that we host ourselves, and we make it a point to build relationships with people there and get to know them that way too, in addition to the phone calls and emails and all of that. Some people, speak for themselves. For example, when we were hosting our Arcview conference in Santa Monica, in Los Angeles, in California, a couple of months ago, we had people from Casa Verde and Navy Capital, Canopy Growth. These names sort of speak for themselves, right? But by and large, we have a whole team that handles the vetting and the onboarding and the managing process, and they do a great job at it.
That's really the most important part, to vet people like that. Honestly, I guess if you're that financially endowed, it's not so hard to check you out, especially these days. You can definitely get letters of credit from people's banks. You can get personal recommendations from people. Somebody always knows the other guy, and if there's any skeletons, like you can generally dig them up. I know there's professionals out there that can hide from all of us, but yeah, man, it's important to vet it. That's great that you guys put so much effort into it. This just isn't in the U.S. anymore. This is all over the world. I mean, you mentioned Vancouver, but you've got an investor conference in Bogota, right? You've got other places in the world too, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. We've been to Toronto as well in years past, but we're really excited to be breaking into the South American market by hosting our first ever investor conference in Bogota, Colombia, May 2nd. That's sort of a smaller version of what we usually do. Our investor meetings are normally 3 days long, but in May in Bogota, we're just going to do a single day. And that's an opportunity to bring American investors to Colombia and show what's going on down there, but also introduce Colombian investors and other South American investors to American opportunities that we'll be bringing down there. So we're really excited to take a look at how the cannabis industry is growing in Colombia. We've already expanded beyond Canada already. We've gone to Hong Kong, for example, last year to test the waters of how the cannabis market is doing there. We have one of our team members that goes to China all the time to just sort of keep the pulse on how the hemp market is sort of moving and shaking around there. And so we're really excited to see not just our own investor membership going to these investor meetings with us all around the world, but just in general, seeing cannabis grow from just being a niche American issue to an international phenomenon, an industry, really.
Now you've breached one of my favorite subjects of hemp. Man, let's talk about hemp. I know you guys have just been, hearing so much investment opportunity with hemp.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Not a day goes by when I don't hear about something that someone is doing in the hemp space, especially with the passing of the Farm Bill. A lot of excitement and a lot of activity around the hemp space and CBD that I'm seeing come through Arcview.
They have become my number one customer here at Cultivate Colorado for sure. The number one conversation we have is hemp. The federal Farm Bill that I'm not going to say legalizes hemp, but has really done a huge effort into making hemp a commodity and a really viable farming product. I really feel that it's going to pave the way for ganja and how it's going to be federally dealt with. Do you see some problems going on right now with the scale of hemp and with funding of hemp?
I wouldn't call them problems as much as I call them road bumps. I think most, if not all, problems can be worked through. But especially here at Arcview, given the fact that we've been at this for 9 years, we've been through a couple of waves of excitement, I'll say. When the first cannabis company ever got listed on one of the pink sheet stock exchanges. When, the Colorado and Washington and Oregon first legalized, and that wave of excitement. When Canada went legal at an adult use or recreational level. We've also, been through all these waves, and hemp is, don't get me wrong, there's definitely something special about the birth and the growth of the hemp industry and CBD and the passing of the Farm Bill. But as you might already be privy to, the really high wholesale prices of the traditional cannabis plant did reach a peak and then has slowly started to lower over the years because people realize that cannabis can't exactly sustain those prices, especially in a regulated market. And so we see hemp headed in a similar direction. Don't know exactly when, but I imagine it'll start out being a really great cash crop for a lot of cultivators. But as competition starts increasing, people start bringing new technology into the mix, that we're going to see a lowering of the wholesale price of hemp. Also, quality is a huge issue. That's one of the key things that our investment committee takes a look at when it comes to funding any sort of hemp or CBD related opportunities. We want to know where the hemp comes from, what the purification or the distilling process is like, how clean it is, as well as the quality level, all of that we're curious about, because we don't want to, fund or back projects that eventually have a negative impact on people's health. That's not what we're in the business in. So we take a close look at things like that.
I think you're right on with hemp, Louis. It's an exciting project right now. The price is falling rapidly. When we first got involved with it 5 years ago, it was $1,200 a pound. It cost just as much as ganja did at the time. Now I see it averaged, I shouldn't say average, but I see prices ranging from $100 to $26 a pound. Throughout the Southeast, I see $26, $28 as a common price. Their quality might not be as good, and that's why it's a little lower. And hey, nothing against you Southern farmers. You know how that rain is. You know how much mold was out there. You know how the crops didn't mature right. Oregon had an exceptional year this year with quality, but their prices still have remained relatively high. And I hear people selling from $50 to $80 a pound up there. And, we're talking biomass when we talk pounds, which is just, bucked buds and leaves that are off the stems primarily. It's definitely changing. There's still good money in it for sure. And I still think there's money in it at $10 a pound. You just have to scale your growth. The isolate market, I think that's going to be the people that take the biggest hit coming soon. Most people have built their manufacturing plants, there's extraction plants on old garage or distilling technology, and it just doesn't scale the same. And these large companies that are coming in, or these large extraction facilities that are being built that are more on a chemical scale, they're just so much faster and do it so much cheaper that it's just going to be hard to compete by building with the old technology that most of the extractors are. So I definitely see that there's going to be some confusion in the marketplace on the isolate side as well. But as far as like the end user products, those are taking off. They're going to put CBD in every single thing, from toothpaste to bubble gum to peanut butter, everything. See, people have designs to put it in everything. So supply and demand, who knows where it's going to go, but I think it's a wonderful thing that's happening with hemp right now for sure. I think it's a great opportunity for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that too, CBD being included in all sorts of products, teas and juices and pet products and all sorts of things. And the health benefits that come with, particularly in the health and wellness space, I'm pretty excited for, because in my mind, it sort of paves the way for the 100 plus other cannabinoids, right? Conversation is mostly around THC and CBD, but there's all these other cannabinoids that we haven't fully researched. We hear a lot of stories, and there's people who are doing good research, but hasn't really hit that critical mass. Once it does, I'm really excited to see, years down the road, more health and wellness products based out of the cannabis plant, and eventually helping the lives of everyone. It's definitely, challenging in some cases, and because this is new for all of us. But I think there's definitely a positive future that we're working towards.
Oh, yeah. Cannabis continues to cultivate us. That's for sure. Most people think it's the other way around, but I'm pretty sure that it's the cannabis plant that's cultivating us.
Exactly.
It's been really good chatting with you today. I'd like to ask you kind of one other question, man. If you have some advice for entrepreneurs coming into cannabis business, what would it be?
For sure. If you're just trying to break into the cannabis industry, I would bring both your skills and your authenticity to this really cool space. I've heard it from a number of people, whether they're investors or startups or just people who are generally involved. There's a different level of camaraderie and there's a different level of connection in this industry. And people can only really do that because they're authentic, right? Because they really do want to build something new, that they want to get involved and get close to the cannabis plant, that they really want to put their skills to use. And to that point, not only should you bring your genuine interest in cannabis, but think about the skills that you have to bring to the table. I mean, now that the cannabis industry is an industry, you're going to need what any other business is going to need: sales, marketing, design, corporate development, leadership skills, management skills. If you're a tech company, coding skills, all those things. If you're in school already, maybe you're a student who's in college or whatever, or you're a working professional that's just looking for something new, think about the skills that you could bring to the table and find startups and other opportunities that could best use those skills. And so that'd be some of the advice I'd leave with anyone who's trying to get involved in the space.
Oh man, that's really great advice, because you don't have to be a grower or a weed dealer or a geneticist to be involved in this. It's the business is bigger than that. It takes CEOs, CFOs, administrators, IT people, organizers. It takes all types of people. I mean, marketers. Marketing is the hardest thing to do with cannabis right now. Like, the elite marketers should gravitate towards cannabis because it is so difficult. There's opportunities everywhere with it. Like I said, who's cultivating who? This has been a great episode. Thanks for joining me. Louis.
Oh, thanks so much, Chip. It was a pleasure being on The Real Dirt. Thanks for having me.
Louis Hahn, director of the Deal Flow with the Arcview Group. If you like this episode or others, please join us at therealdirt.com or download the podcasts that are the Real Dirt podcast on iTunes. Subscribe. If you have any comments, please feel free to email us at info@therealdirt.com or hey, chip@therealdirt.com. I'd be glad to chat with you. Thanks again, Louis, and hey, have a great day, man.
Thank you, Chip. You have a good day, too.